So to start off with, well, give us the very brief intro, and then I'll dig into a few more questions from that.
An intro, oh God. Well, I spilt my drink. It wasn't a great start. And it was orange juice, so it wasn't like it was just water or anything, and it's on carpet. So
okay, well, what you pour on? You know, if you pour white wine on red wine to get it out, what you pour on orange juice, like pineapple juice or something?
I was just like scrubbing away. It's fine. I think it's fine. But no, I'm Brian. I guess. Well, I am. I live with borderline personality disorder. Sometimes in the UK, it's referred to as emotionally unstable personality disorder. I do not like that because I feel like that's more stigmatizing. And BPD is already one of the most stigmatized mental illnesses out there, and also with like one of the highest suicide rates as well. So I think some of that goes hand in hand. And so I'm just trying to raise awareness about it, just because I've been through a lot in my life. And interestingly enough, because obviously you were asking about overreactions. One thing.
That's why I put that in today.
Okay. One thing with BPD is, like one of the traits is intense emotions and mood swings. So, for example, if you went through a breakup, somebody with BPD would feel that like way more intensely.
Yeah.
Also, like you're looking at somebody, I've literally cried over spilled milk before. And, you know, people are like, oh, that's an overreaction. But I can't remember which part of the brain it is. But people with BPD, that part's smaller than the average person. So we do respond more intensely or respond more quickly. But also then the kind of cool down period is longer.
Yeah.
And also like my moods are up and down all day, and it could be the smallest thing. You know, it could be like one horrible comment, or I don't know, but the person who served me in a coffee shop was a bit rude. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. I joke about it, but it's actually quite hard to kind of really live with. But I think that's my way of dealing with it, just laughing at myself.
Yeah. I think it's important. I mean, I have. I was about to say I have borderline personality. No, that's not what I have. Where's my wallet with my card? No, like, what do I have again? I have bipolar disorder. So bipolar disorder, with the kind of emotional ups and downs of it, is much more of a kind of. It varies from person to person, but it's a much smoother process. It's not. It's to call it smooth, like seriously trivializes it, but it's a much smoother process than with BPD. And BPD is a kind of much more okay. I can feel that bubbling up quite early, and I do get some warning signs to it. And this is why I'm really interested in this question about overreactions, because I know where I would react at various different points within that cycle. So if you imagine it like kind of like a sound wave, like, you know, it's got your up and you've got your top, you've got your bottom and everything in between. If you were to kind of pinpoint that on a graph with what my reaction's going to be like, if it was up here in mania, it'd probably be something quirky, quippy, maybe a little bit scathing, but like not overly, like it'd still be like full on confident pants on today. I can rock through this. Then I've got the rational section in the middle.
Yep.
But then when I'm down here, and again, not just depending on the mood, but certainly depending on the stimulus that's going on, my reaction's going to be extremely different to there. And I think this is one of the big reasons I've wanted to have someone on talk about BPD for a long time now. And you're actually the first person I've approached that didn't actually get really scared about. I mean, you might actually be scared, but like didn't get scared off. Say, yeah, I'd love to do that, and then a week later was like, actually, I don't think I can actually go on and talk about this. So first of all, massively thank you for that. And yeah, that's why I'm asking the question about overreactions and reactions, because within mental health, you know, how often do we get told we're overreacting? And one of my big key messages I try and get out there is to not expect a person with a condition to act like they've not got it. You know, like if you're expecting, if someone knows that I'm here and that's my reaction at this time, please know I'm not doing that deliberately. Please know I'm doing whatever I have the capacity left to do as a person at this point. And please, if you can, and I know it's a lot to ask of people, but if you can, be the bigger person for me, or be the more rational person. Don't expect me to be the more rational person at that. And I think because because I have that chunk where I exist in the middle and I think things through very well and I rationalize things very well. So people expect my reactions to be measured like that all the time. So when I'm symptomatic, it's a shock for people. So and that's kind of one of the big things I've tried to get out there is, and I think with BPD in particular, it's like okay, we need to actually start talking about, okay, not expecting a person with BPD to act like they don't. You know?
Yeah, and I think because a lot of the times, especially with BPD and bipolar, people often get like misdiagnosed with like either way round. And because like when I was a bit younger, I knew I definitely had more than depression, anxiety. I did think bipolar, but my moods were more up and down throughout the day, rather than I'd have manic long periods and depressive long periods. And also, like the core thing with BPD, in my opinion anyway, is the fear of abandonment.
Yep.
And I know people with bipolar, they might not necessarily get that. And it's very exhausting. But I don't know whether you experience this as well, but being self-aware sometimes is worse because you know you're being a dickhead.
No, I don't relate to that at all.
Like, oh, and like one of the famous phrases people always told me was, "Oh, well, you were fine 5 minutes ago." Now I'm like, yeah, that was 5 minutes ago. A lot's happened, or even not a lot, but just emotion dysregulation.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about. Let's go back to kind of like the early stages and stuff. So when was the kind of first signs to you that there was something different about you?
I mean, to be honest, I think I'd always knew I had mental health issues, but I think I didn't really think it was more than depression, anxiety until like a lot later. So, you know, I was kind of doing things for depression, anxiety, but then symptoms of BPD weren't being looked at, so I wasn't really getting any better. Mm-hmm. But, you know, kind of looking back now, like with the fear of abandonment thing, like even as a kid, I'd go to school and because there's a thing called object permanence that it's usually like what happens with babies. That's why, you know, if you play peekaboo with a baby, you do that, they literally think you're not there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of prevalent, kind of like that. So, you know, like I'd be at school and then so like my parents weren't around. So I'd be like, oh my God, they've left or I'm never going to see them again. But also kind of, I was bullied heavily at school, like throughout my entire school years. And that affects your brain development, like scientifically. But society doesn't want to admit that. They're like, oh no, you just get over it. Or especially the bullies themselves, of course they'd say that because they probably didn't give it a second thought what they did to you most of the time. Some do, some don't. But, you know, there were days where I literally didn't want to go into school. I was suicidal at a very young age. But, you know, whenever I would go to like teachers or whatever, they'd be like, oh, just ignore it. And, you know, I'm like, okay, so you want me to ignore the things they're doing, so they're not getting punished for it. But also some parents would even just laugh it off if their kid was bullying somebody. So I live in a small town and it's very much like they're still in the 1920s. They're very sexist, homophobic, racist, everything. And
did they wear flapper girl outfits though?
Not quite. But so, you know, there's a lot of justifications for things like that. People are like, oh, well, it's just their generation, or they don't mean it that way. So, or even like when I was being bullied, I'd react. The only thing they'd pay attention to was my reaction.
Yeah.
Oh, don't retaliate. Just don't say anything. Rather than looking at the problem firsthand. And I even had teachers bully me. And there was one incident, I remember I was crying on the playground. The teacher comes up to me, she goes, "You're the kid that gets bullied, aren't you?" I'm like, I have a name. Yes. What do I say to that? But so, and also looking into like research, you know, kind of like toxic or like narcissistic people, especially like people don't like the science behind it or like the psychology behind it, you know, how you're brought up or whatever, you know, you then develop these attachment styles.
Yeah.
And until you learn that, you keep going back to familiar relationships as an adult because you're like, oh, this feels familiar.
Yeah.
So it was only probably even in the past year, I kind of looked back. I was like, whenever I got with somebody that maybe was bad for me, I always had this thought, like, oh, this reminds me of home, or this reminds me of like where I live. And I'm like, that's not good now, you know, with my experiences. And again, there's all these justifications, and you do it yourself, you know, oh, but I've been friends with them for 5 years, so I have to stay friends with them, even though they make me feel crap about myself. Or sometimes it's like, oh, but it's family. And again, society will be like, oh, you only get one mother, you only get whatever. And to try and kind of, because then I don't know whether it is like that, but then, so then that means they don't have to look within themselves and their relationships with people, because maybe that it's normalized for them. So then I kind of then start, oh, maybe I'm being too sensitive, or maybe I am overreacting. But it's like with the BPD, like not many people have actually wanted to sit down, but okay, how does this affect you in your daily life? Is there anything I can do to meet you halfway? It would always be like, oh, well, no, that's your problem. You need to sort that out. Anything I do doesn't matter. And especially since kind of talking about it online on social media, you know, I've had guys, you know, they'll be like, oh, it's really nice what you're doing, blah, blah. Then they'll make advances. Then I just don't respond to the advances because I'm like not interested like that. And then they'll be like, oh, well, you're just doing it for attention. You're letting it define you. I'm like, oh, okay, so you were praising it because you could have got something out of it, but now you're not getting that. You're throwing it in my face. And it's even like how well I want to. The thing is, I hate saying I'm doing well with it because then I feel big-headed. But like doing well with mental health advocacy and stuff, like all of
I think it's okay. I think it's okay to say that. It's not big-headed, and it's the opposite. Like we tend to go towards the opposite, and we tend to kind of within mental health push aside when we're doing well. And we've got an expression in my community which is appropriate vibes only, which is why we have an avocado as a mascot, because AVO, appropriate vibes only, which basically means we don't do that toxic positivity stuff, but we also don't do toxic negativity. We're only the people with negative emotions, or we don't even call them negative, we call them appropriate emotions, you know? So, and this is why is there such a thing as an overreaction? It's like, well, it's an appropriate reaction given the stimulus is the short summary. But I think we're all really, really good at putting ourselves down. And we think as if that by bigging ourselves up or saying that we're doing well, that we're going to come across as a narcissist, or we're going to become a narcissist. It's like, it doesn't, as you well know from looking at the psychology, it doesn't work like that. And the problem is when we don't acknowledge, when we make it normalized that we can notice when things are going wrong, and it's, you know, it's okay not to be okay, which is one of the biggest prime sayings when we normalize just that. When we normalize that, that's good. But when we normalize just that, and we forget to say it's actually okay. It's okay to be okay, because it's okay to be good. It's okay to be doing well. And within mental health communities, we're almost sort of made to feel guilty about having a good day. And it's like, okay, well, we've expressed to people, you don't have to feel guilty about having a bad day because it's not going to bring other people down. And so I feel that we should also not have to feel guilty about having a good day either. Like, you know, all of our emotions, wherever they are in that spectrum, all of our performance, wherever it is in that spectrum, should be something that we are able to openly talk about, because otherwise we end up with the pendulum swinging the other way. And instead of it only being good that people share the good times and they've got to keep the bad times to themselves, we'll end up in a situation where only people can share the bad times because they're afraid of sharing the good times. So actually, you know, I'll champion you. It's fine. So so carry on.
No, because I think like I've seen some like recent articles about how not always, but sometimes BPD can come from trauma or an invalidating upbringing. And I found, especially in my experience, I think I always like to say that because I can't speak for everybody. BPD is very different for everybody, so I'm just speaking from my experience. But I had a lot of those toxic people around me where they'd constantly put me down and stuff like that. But then when I would finally say something, it would be a thing of, oh, have you taken your meds today? Or, well, you've got an attitude. don't you dare talk to me like that. So then I'd be quiet again.
Yeah.
Because then I'd be like, oh, clearly it's just because obviously they're not having that self-reflective capability to be like, oh, maybe it's something I have done. No, it's always you. Yeah. But also, so I know with BPD there's this thing called like black and white thinking. So I can go from like love to hate very quickly, which often I think like the fear of abandonment links into that, because I'm going to sound really weird, but I remember I was going out with somebody like a few years ago, and like we'd always like Snapchat each other saying, oh, like good morning. So like he Snapchatted me saying good morning babe, 3 kisses. Then the next day he put good morning without the babe, but still the 3 kisses. And I was like, oh my God, he hates me. Like then I'm trying to figure out, is it because I said that? Was it because I did that? And then I'll be like, oh, do you hate me? And then it's kind of a whole like cycle. But also I found that like the performative mental health awareness that's going on at the moment, you know, people are very much like, oh, mental health awareness, if it's depression, anxiety. But as soon as it's something like BPD or bipolar or whatever, you know, people are, oh, yeah, we don't want to talk about those symptoms.
Yeah.
Let's not do that. Or then it's kind of, because the thing is, everybody has mental health, like everybody has physical health, but not everybody has mental illness, not everybody has physical illness. And also, the other thing I find hard as well, because BPD is in the same cluster as narcissistic personality disorder, and also trying to destigmatize things, then I feel like I'm not able to talk about narcissism. But there's a YouTuber called Dr. Harmony. She's amazing. Like, she does a lot about narcissism. But she also says, you know, saying somebody's narcissistic is just like, you know, somebody's arrogant or somebody's sweet. Yeah. It's a descriptive term. It's not meant to diagnose anybody. You know, it's just saying, oh, this person's a bit narcissistic. And, you know, it's not like I'm going around saying, oh, this person has NPD, which is what a lot of people tend to do. Yeah. But then also you do get people, they've maybe met one person with BPD and they're like, oh, they were abusive. I'm like, okay, that's that person as a whole. Yeah. And it's also trying to, you know, because I did have like a lot of toxic traits and stuff that I'm still learning to overcome today. And I think it takes a lot more for people to actually own up to these things about, actually, this is something I need to work on. Whereas a lot of people, I was like, yeah, I'm toxic, deal with it, you know. And don't get me wrong, you know, it's hard work. But like you said, you know, it's as soon as they start expecting you to act like you don't have bipolar or you don't have BPD, because it's this weird societal thing where it's like, okay, we're going to teach the people with mental illnesses or whatever to adapt to society. Yeah. Why not teach society to adapt to our needs as well? Yeah. And, you know, something as small, you know, like just asking a partner to be like, oh, well, I'm sure a text good night isn't much. And then be like, oh, well, you're asking for too much. Because I think people with BPD and like narcissistic people tend to attract each other. From my experience anyway. But I'm not saying, you know, I've got my issues too, but, you know, it's very often I've had the people where it's like, funny enough, they'd always be like, oh, I love how open you are, love how genuine you are, until I'm like that with them, or I call them out and stuff. Yeah. You know, like, you know, I've had people that I haven't spoken to in years, or I've never really had a close relationship with, and now getting annoyed with me that I'm not responding to their messages. And I'm like, we don't talk anyway. And, you know, I try and kind of, again, it's that thing, it's like, am I being big-headed? Because, like, people have said that a few times, like, oh, well, you're getting full of yourself. I'm like, no, I'm just getting better at boundaries. I'm better at realising what people I want around me. But people that aren't used to having boundaries, they don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say, there's a lot. I know I didn't say. I said I wasn't going to go to the chat until 45 minutes. There's a lot of agreement coming from the chat right now, and as I'm sure you can tell by the fact that I'm kind of like giggling along over here. It's. I remember used to saying like that. You know, when I was kind of helping people with self-esteem, it's like warning may come with like side effects like loss of friendships and stuff, because it's people get used to us in a certain way. Yep. And when and it doesn't necessarily mean that we're evolving and they're not evolving all the time. It sometimes means we're all just evolving in a slightly different direction. The two cruise ships going 1 degree in opposite directions away from each other just get progressively further apart. It doesn't have to be a huge, massive change, but it's an interesting one that, like, again, it's normalized. It's not everybody in this world talks to themselves badly at some point in their life. Most people for most of their lives, and when you actually start to then actually big yourself up, and it's shocking to people. It's weirdly accepted from people they've just always been full of themselves. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's just Johnny. He's just full of himself. But like, but I don't expect that of you, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, it's people notice those changes, and I noticed this because when I had a huge breakdown about 11 years ago, and before that breakdown, I was the same person I am again now. I literally put everybody else first, often to my own detriment. I do that less now, but that was what I'd always do. And then when you do that for too long, eventually something snaps and you're like, oh crap, I need to look after my needs. And if you do that on a sort of healthy way, which is how I try and do it now, it's cool. But I did that in the most unhealthy way and went full on like rebellion, like, screw everybody else, blah blah blah, putting me first. And I burnt a lot of bridges and lost a lot of friends over it. But at the same time, like, there were people within that group that I wasn't acting particularly any worse than that person. It was just by comparison to what those people expected of me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that all my actions at that time were, benevolent. They so weren't. But there definitely needed to be that shift of putting me kind of first. I want to go back to something you said earlier, actually, which is, and this has sort of come up in the last statement you said as well about that whole meeting in the middle thing. It's like, you said, the world wants us to learn how to adapt to it. We kind of want the world to adapt to us, and it's I love the fact you said meet in the middle, because like last year, my entire process last year was based on the mantra not them and us but all of us. Like, we all have mental health, how can we all work together? How can I do my bit? What can you do for me? And if everyone took that same attitude, sorted, utopia. Basically just ended up pissing people off on both sides of the fence when I took that attitude. Like, lost a few friends in the mental health space, lost a few friends in the non-mental health space, everyone will chat, will be like, yeah, but you gained some of us, and I'm like, okay, maybe it wasn't as, but it did just seem to be like, no one knew where to place me for a whole of last year. But it sounds so simple, and like I keep meaning to make this into a drawing about the idea of sitting on the fence. Like, people think that sitting in the middle as sitting on the fence. I'm like, no, here's a fence all the way over on the far left. This is going to hurt you, which is the people with mental health thinking that the entirety of society should adapt to us. Right, that's going to hurt us if we think like that. Then there's another fence on this side. Sitting on that fence is going to hurt you too, which is everyone with mental health needs to look after themselves. And then there's a great big field between the fences. It's not two fences either side of one narrow fence in the middle. It's a great big field of where we could actually compromise and come together and work together. And what you said earlier was, nobody asks me, what can I do to help? How can I meet you in the middle? So I want to ask you, what can we do to help, and how can we meet you in the middle?
I don't know.
I love it.
That might be the issue. No, I think it's just something as simple as just validating our experience or our emotions. Again, they're like, oh, well, you shouldn't be feeling like that or whatever. Because basically I was in 2 like emotionally abusive relationships kind of back to back. They were very short term. So the first one ended and I was already at rock bottom. Then I started reaching out to a mental health group on Facebook. And one of the admins approached me. He was like, oh, I just went through something similar, blah, blah. Then he sent like a bit of an inappropriate message. I was like, okay, that's fine. Then we started talking, started kind of like connecting. And I found it nice because he was looking into BPD, but I felt like a bit too much, because then he was like, oh, well, between 12 and 3 p.m., you're like this. And because like he was a doctor and he was also an admin for a group for mental health issues on Facebook. So lots of things went down. And then that resulted in me having a breakdown, going into a psychiatric hospital. And I tried bringing it up with the group, being like, because weirdly enough, that admin, he stepped down because they put a new rule in place to say not to engage with members personally.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, I'm not being told what I can and can't do, which, I think at that point, I didn't know right from wrong. I didn't know who to trust. I was at a very low point. So I felt he groomed me a bit and kind of knew what he was doing. But when I brought it up to the group, because they'd done charity work, they'd been on TV a few times, they literally said to me that they don't want the group tarnished by what happened. And they was like, oh, we were trying to support you. I was like, no, you didn't. You literally told me it was just that I was beyond his help. They were kind of defending him. And, it's that performative thing, where you've got all these groups, but then they're trying to cover up something, or they're trying to make the member feel bad because, they're the one with the mental health issue. It's their problem. Rather than actually being like, no, this admin took advantage of my vulnerable situation. And because, people were like, well, why didn't you call it out? I was like, I tried, and that's where I was met with, oh, well, we were trying to help you. A lot of gaslighting by other people saying, oh, you were just crying abuse, you were just paranoid. Because when it is emotional abuse, because there's no physical thing you can see, people are like, oh, maybe you're seeing it wrong.
Yeah.
And especially with BPD as well, people are like, oh, maybe you're the manipulative one. Maybe you were being toxic. I was like, I could have been, but I was at rock bottom. No excuse for anything. But I literally was struggling to get through the day without breaking down multiple times. It was a really low point. And like you said, about having that breakdown, something just because basically while I was in the hospital, he said to me that he made the whole relationship up, that he never wanted it. And he was just going along with it. And at first I was like, okay, maybe he was saying that to just get me off his back. But then I thought, either way, that's messed up to make me think he made it up. Yeah. And, even talking about it with the psychiatrists in the hospital, there's like, oh, it sounds quite narcissistic, blah, blah. Which weirdly, because he didn't like me looking into it. I mean, usually they're not that reflective sometimes. But, literally something just switched in me, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm done with people leaving when it gets tough. I'm done with people always pointing the finger at me. I've always been willing to be like, okay, this is what I'm doing wrong. So I was like, something in me, not that something in me had to change. It's not that I needed to change so much, but it was recognizing those red flags and things like that. Because since I have noticed how toxic people work, people are sticking around less, either because they can't manipulate me anymore, or also even just one thing I've learned is noticing how I feel whenever I step away from an interaction with somebody. There's certain people from my past that whenever I left, I felt deflated, didn't feel good about myself. Even if it was just seeing them for 10 minutes, it would be in my head for a day. Mm-hmm. And, I feel like I've got good people around me now. And, a lot of people say, kind of what I'm doing is for attention, sharing mental health awareness. And especially with the rapid things, I could post something on Twitter, on TikTok, whatever, to be like, I've had enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. Then 5 minutes later, I'm there dancing around yeah, enjoying myself. And people are like, oh, but you were doing that 5 minutes ago. That's 5 minutes. Yeah. And I think the main thing I want people to hopefully take away from it is that just because our emotions are more intense, it doesn't make them any less valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
People are like, oh, well, you're upset about some bloke ghosting you after one date. It was just one date. I was like, but they should still be respectful. Plus, I feel things more intensely than maybe you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, there's, again, a lot of love coming from the chat. again, and I can relate with a lot of that as well. As I said, my emotions go up and down slower than that, but there's a part of bipolar called rapid cycling, which means that I can be both depressed and manic multiple times in one day.
Okay.
And I can totally honestly relate to the fact that, I mean, my Discord community and my stream community have seen it, because I made a promise like a few years back that I wouldn't just show the top bits of bipolar. I wouldn't just show the fact that I'm doing great. Like, you know, I'd show that, but I'd also show the bad. So my community know that, like, you know, before COVID and when I could go out and I was doing talks and stages and all the rest of it, I kind of was distracted a little bit more from it. But with a little bit more time to sit and think at home now, it's like, I can want to quit like 3 times a week, and I can desperately like really want to quit, and then 5 minutes later be up making t-shirts or something, and then it's like and you know, 2 minutes later singing a song about creating hype trains or something. But it's and that's the whole thing, is that, yeah, I think people need to understand that that's, you know, that the emotional kind of, first of all, generally speaking, people with BPD or people with bipolar do have, like, if you imagine your emotions are like a 0 to 10, like we kind of have a -2 to 12. It's like, so we've got a couple of extra on the boundaries, but the journey time between those is you know, as in, it's quicker for me and then significantly quicker for you. And again, just to clarify, this is my experience of bipolar, your experience of BPD, and it's not representative of absolutely everybody's, but it's helping people be aware of that. I mean, Blushing Craft has said something before, which was, I'll see if I can get it. It's gone. It was something about educating people. One thing we can do is educate ourselves on what it can be like to living with BPD or bipolar or any other personality disorder, really. And it's one of those things that I understand that it is such a monumental task to try and expect the rest of the world to understand conditions that for yourself or me, it's taken us our entire lives to kind of to understand, and there is like hundreds of different conditions out of there, but like I feel like we need to do what we can to kind of, if by creating the type of content that you do or the content that I do, that hopefully accelerates a little bit of that understanding. You know, we don't all have to go and do a 4-year degree in each of these courses. You know, someone doesn't have to go and live 39 years of being bipolar to understand it, hopefully is. And they don't need to understand it as well as I do. They don't need to understand it to the same level I do. They just need to understand it in a level that helps them communicate a little bit better, or helps, you know, because, yeah, it does. It's like I said before, when I'm existing in the middle, I'll do all the work for the other person. I'll do it. Like, I will do all the work. When I have the capacity to, I will do all the work. But when I don't have the capacity to, it's not that I don't want to. It's not that, you know, I'm deliberately being whatever, down in the dumps, depressed, difficult. It's yeah, okay. I mean, it is difficult, but there's an expression, you know, you said before about, you know, people keep on calling you out for attention. I hate that. And like we always say that you know, people with mental health, we're not actually looking for attention. We're looking for connection. We're looking for, and attention's the gateway to connection. Unfortunately, you can't connect with people until they actually know about your existence, you know. And it's funny, really, how when you said before about those guys that had, like, basically, you know, essentially use your social media as a dating platform, and it's like, and then they're like, oh, you're only doing this for attention. It's like, but the thing is, I've just actually told you I don't want the attention. So it's like so actually, who in this situation is using it for attention? It's like, you know, like they wanted your attention, and you wanted attention of the condition, you know. So it's well,
plus it's like, you know, I think there's a lot of entitlement on social media. You know, I think also people forget that I'm not a therapist. I'm not a substitute for a therapist. Like, if I sat here like responding to every single message I got, like, I would not be doing well myself. And, you know, like, I am struggling a bit at the moment, just because, like, personal things. But, you know, again, it will be people that, you know, they'll be like, oh, well, you're fake because you didn't help me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I didn't realize that. I think, like, the bigger the platform I'm getting, I think there's a bit more responsibility, but it's kind of like, I'm still not responsible for other people's mental health because I'm sharing my experiences.
Yeah.
I can be there when I can and where I can. And, you know, also they don't see the other things I'm doing that day. And, you know, because I watched your video about kind of how your social media stats affect you.
Yeah.
And
that's why they're switched off for it now.
You can't do that on TikTok, and it's really annoying. Like, because when you're doing a TikTok live, it literally says how many viewers are coming in. I remember you were literally saying, even if there's 2 people, talk as if there's like 22.
Yeah.
But whereas like on TikTok, you'd be like, oh, I've got like 1 person. You like, I feel like a twat talking about something. Actually, people aren't commenting. You're like, oh, I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah.
But also, like the gym's reopening. Like, I'm so happy about that. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, those people are really good looking over there. I look terrible. Oh. And I'm just not going to bother.
Yeah, it's difficult because there's I wrote a poem about social media. Where on earth is my phone? There's one line from it like that. I wrote a poem about my addiction to social media like about a year ago, and there's a line in it that says, like, basically, because of what I want to do. In fact, I'm gonna actually find it. If I search for "I have an addiction" on my phone, it should come up. Let's see, addiction. No, it's not on there. Oh, that's really annoying. Maybe I've gone in the wrong folder. Let's try that one. Okay. It basically says something on the lines of, I have an addiction and it's terrifyingly self-sustaining, and it basically says that that I need these numbers to grow, but I don't need part of the old me from being a kid that was I was a massive attention seeker because I didn't get any when I was young. Like, it made me crave it. It made me crave it like crazy. My brother and my dad made me literally pretended I was invisible when I was a kid, and that made me essentially want to do anything I possibly could to not be invisible. Hence, bright colours, being loud, playing musical instruments, trying to entertain people, so on and so forth. And I would say that's 5 or 6 years ago. I still wasn't over that. Still had full-on daddy issues. I would do anything to impress blokes. It was like I wasn't craving impressing women so much, because I think that's probably because my mum always validated me, but my dad didn't. Right. But I'd literally do what I can to kind of get the attention of mentors, and then go and try and work with them, and then really try my best to impress them while I was there, and on all the rest of that. And that cycle continued until about 5 or 6 years ago, until I realised that I was looking for self-esteem everywhere but myself. And then once I started giving myself my own validation, I calmed down a hell of a lot for a little bit, and then I just realised that I just really enjoy doing those type of things, putting on my Craylo, or it's half crown, half halo. I do still enjoy it, but the thing is, I always wanted it for. If I look back, what I wanted it for was I always wanted that attention to positively impact somebody. Yeah. So I used music for that. I used comedy for that, and then eventually it was okay, well, I want attention on the stuff I'm doing in the gym, not so that people can look at my muscles and think that they're amazing, but so that I can actually help people. I think if you were in the chat before, when Real Scottish Genius said that he's planning to go to the gym, and I'm like, no, seriously, if you can't afford a trainer right now, I'll give you as much advice as you want. It's let's get this working. I just wanted to help people. And the problem is with social media is people don't give a shit about what you do until they give a shit about who you are. And I hate that. I hate the fact that we actually, if you take a video, and it can be the most amazing video in the world, but if you multiply it by one person that's watching it, that's the power of the video is multiplied by 1. If 1 million people watch it, it's multiplied by 1 million, And some of the things that are the most well spread out there in the world aren't actually always the best. They're just the ones that happen to hit that point. And you do need a certain degree of it. And the point in the poem that I think that I wish I could get the exact line, but it says something like why do I do this to myself? Because I know that I get tortured. I get tortured by those, not all the time, but I used to have body dysmorphia, and I used to get tortured by those numbers. And now the social media numbers are the ones that actually torture me a little bit. And or a lot. Depends where I am on that cycle again. If I'm up here, I can handle it. If I'm down there, I can't. And if I'm down there, I check them 37 times more regularly. Yeah. But just in the off chance that something's going to have blown up, and oh my God, doesn't TikTok make you want to do that? Because anything can blow up on TikTok. No, all my videos get exactly 180 views now. No matter what I do, trending songs, doesn't matter. But the line was, actually staying silent hurts me more, was like the line that it works its way up to, is that for me, I've tried it. I've tried cold turkey in the social media side of things. I've taken days, weeks. I'm not sure if I've ever taken a month off of it. I've taken weeks off of it though, and just thought, you know what, I'm not going to post anything. And then all that happens is all the things that I want to say start building up in my head, and I've got, and I actually, again, this, like, people might see this as vain, and I don't give a crap if they do. I think I've got some pretty good things to say. I think I say things pretty well, and I think I put things in light that a lot of people don't. And very often I get the compliments, oh, I've never thought of it like that, and I love it when I get that compliment. So I'm gonna say them, because obviously I think that I've got something to give out there, and as a result, yeah, okay, people are probably going to call me out for attention on that. I'm probably always going to struggle with those numbers on that. I remember saying to one of my friends last night, I was on a stream until 4:00 in the morning last night on an American stream, and I had my Twitch was in the background of people that I follow, and one of the people I follow must have been getting raided, and she kept on going from 15 viewers to 150, and then back down to 15, and then to 120, and then back down to 15, and I was like, I'm like, you know what? In a weird way, I kind of like being this. Mine will go, I don't know, mine will go up to 50 at most. We'll hover around the 20s most of the time. At the minute, I don't have my view account on live anymore, but I'm like, what will it do to my head if that ever happens to me? You know, like if I ever get to that point where I've got thousands. Okay, if you've got 10 people in and it fluctuates by 10%, that's one person gone. Mm-hmm. If you've got 1,000 people in and it fluctuates by 10%, that's 100 people gone. And
God, what is wrong with me?
Well, exactly, and it's that's the kind of problem, is that I know that's there. If I get what I'm aiming for, I know that that's there, and I know that I'm going to actually have to deal with that when it comes, and which is again probably why I have it. One of the other reasons why I have it switched off. Now I know you. Well, I don't know you can't do it on TikTok because I don't have enough followers on TikTok to be able to go live. So, but it's difficult, and especially the difficulty of it is, and again, I imagine this is something that's, for your standard person, hard. For someone with bipolar, a little bit harder. For someone with borderline, even harder again, because it's not what the number is; it's what we think the number means.
Oh, and plus, even, I don't know whether you get it as well, but I could post a video, I could post something, could have 10 people comment, literally 9 of them is positive, 1 of them's negative, and I'll be like, oh, that means I'm a trashy person. I'm a terrible person. I should just go die in a hole.
Yeah, I mean that is actually that's something that is built into every brain, not just our neurodivergent ones. It's not called confirmation bias. It's called negativity bias. It's supposed to keep us alive. Funnily enough, it's supposed to be. Yeah, exactly. If you go out, if you go out into your garden and there's 9 regular house cats and 1 saber-toothed tiger, you're supposed to pay attention to the one that could mess you up. And it's the same principle here. If there's 9 really nice compliments, the one I love to always say is the fact of how, and I used to do this when we could talk in schools, which I can do again in a month, but is that you go in and say, right, if you get 10 compliments on something, let's say you're out in your nice red dress on a Friday night, like I love to be, or at least I did a year and a half ago, it's and then you get all these compliments saying, yeah, looking fierce, looking amazing, blah, 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 and then you get one compliment that says, oh, you're looking really good, but I don't think red's your colour. Exactly. It's not even if someone told me purple wasn't my colour, I'd just die. But if it's not even really an insult, or my absolute favourite, imagine the following phrase first in the voice of your best friend, and then second in the voice of your arch nemesis. I saw you out last night and you were looking really good. Imagine it in the voice of your best friend.
Huh?
If you imagine, I saw you out last night and you were looking really good. Imagine that phrase in the voice of your best friend. Mm-hmm. Now imagine it in the voice of someone that you don't like. It's a very different phrase, isn't it?
This is the thing, because have you seen the film Mean Girls?
I have not, surprisingly.
Okay.
I missed it when it first came out and then never caught it since.
So there's a scene in it where you've got Lindsay Lohan's character and Rachel McAdams' character, And basically, Rachel McAdams is like, "Oh, you're really pretty." Lindsay Lohan's character is like, "Oh, thank you." And then Regina, like, so the character's called Regina, and she's like, "Oh, so you agree? You think you're really pretty?" So if somebody compliments me and say thank you, it's like, "Oh, they think I agree." Then you're like, "Oh, thank you, but it was only like £3 or like anything." Because like it's really hard to just say thank you. But actually, I think something I've seen, I can't remember where, but somebody said that whenever they had negative thoughts in their head, it was usually somebody from their past that would say things like that to them that sticks with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, like I've got a few people where they were always putting me down no matter where it was. You know, like I did performing arts at college, so I want to be like an actor, something, maybe give it a go, or comedy, we'll see. But you know, they were like, "Oh well, you won't make it past Christmas, you won't be any good at it." And you know, like weirdly enough, because I moved out about 2 months ago, and literally a week before I got this flat, the same person was like, "Oh, you won't move out, you can barely look after yourself." And now they're like, "Oh, well done." And you know, it's one of those people where it's like, I do not like being around them. Like they've never got anything nice to say, or it's a backhanded thing. And growing up with that kind of person, that voice is always in my head. If I can't do something, like, "Oh, I'm useless." You know, I don't know how to do things. You know, when I was 15, my dad died, so I was grieving. I got a bit drunk. Then, like an adult in my life, you know, in their 30s, comes out of nowhere, grabs me by the hood, drags me down the road, shoves me in the car, and says, "Don't you dare do that again, you like C-word." You know,
Sorry.
I'm like, that's literally like physical assault.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, but that was ages ago." "Oh, but he said sorry." It's like, no, he said sorry to other people, not me. Like, you know, and also, again, some people feel like they're entitled to treat you that way because maybe they're family, because you've been friends with them for years or whatever. And it's like, no, nobody's entitled to treat you that way. And again, it's all these justifications. And so then people are like, "Oh, why don't you like seeing them? Or why don't you like talking to them?" Because of that, you know. "Oh, just get over it. Oh, it happened years ago." You know, and I think, you know, it kind of really does stick in your head. And when you can't do something, or, you know, because it kind of reinforces that a little bit. Just like, "Oh, they were right. I can't do it." Whereas I think now, again, depending on the day, depending where I'm at, you know, I'm like, "You know what? I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to do it." A bit like moving out, or even people that, you know, if like a video of mine's gone like semi-viral on TikTok, whatever, people will be like, "Oh, well done." But then I'll ask them to like share something, and all of a sudden their share button's broke, but they're happy to do it for other friends or other people. I'm like, okay, so you're just being like a bit opportunist with it, like, because then you're like, "Oh yeah, I know him," but when it's actually asking for that support, they don't want to. And again, that probably makes me sound big-headed. But it's kind of like, where's that support when you need it, rather than just if they could potentially get something out of it.
Yeah. It's difficult as well, because obviously we do have all of these narratives running in our head that have been influenced by experiences and stuff over the years. And you know, obviously a lot of people have that kind of voice of a family member or a nagging teacher or whatever it is kind of going on in their head. But also we all have that voice of ourselves that's kind of that's spent 15, 20 years putting us down, 30 years putting us down. And as a result, sounds much more familiar than the voice that's telling us, actually, you know what, you can do this. I'm going to go to a couple of questions from chat, if that's cool. So, let me actually read that a little bit. I'm having problems with severe anxiety, panic attacks. Long story short, I lost my mum in October very suddenly. What made it 1,000 times worse is that I was on to. I'm so sorry to hear that, anxious academic. I'm seeing if this is relating to the interview, which I don't think it is. Have you got any experience with this? I'll see if you've got any experience with this at all, actually, Brian, while you're on. Is basically Anxious Academic has said since losing his mum, and he actually found her, my brain has been fried. Lockdown has exacerbated the situation, has introduced physical symptoms such as the sensation of a closing throat, extreme dizziness, and the feeling I can get enough air in my lungs. Have you got any experience with this? Like, when your emotions are heightened and stuff, are there any physiological reactions that you've experienced?
Well, I mean, I recently experienced a bit of trauma a few weeks ago, first time in years, and this thing, like, trauma is trauma. Like, I think luckily I'm more aware of things now, whereas I think back then I wouldn't know what it was. And I think, especially losing a parent as well, and during lockdown and around October, that's where the weather's getting bad as well. Losing a parent, like losing anybody to death, it's trauma. But with those kind of intense emotions, or even like sleeping, sometimes I'd sleep and I'd wake up and I'd be like, I can't breathe, or it feels like I'm swallowing a marble or something. I'm not great with advice. I try.
I think the question was at me. It's just obviously, of course, we're in interview mode. I mean, Anxious Academic. I'll jump in and answer that question in a little bit when we finish the interview. There's quite a bit of stuff I can talk about in terms of physiological responses and stuff. Mm-hmm. I just thought. Whilst I had you on, if you don't, because I know again that there can be physiological things, like there can be kind of those, your heart rate's going fast, your brain feels like it's got a bunch of bees in it.
I mean, because one of the symptoms of BPD as well is like dissociation or being out of touch with reality.
Yeah.
And since the trauma I went through like a few weeks ago, that's happened a lot. Like I'll literally sit there and it's like a bit like zoning out. Then all of a sudden half an hour's gone past, or like I could dissociate while on a walk. Like, I'm still fairly aware of my surroundings. Or it's like sometimes I look in the mirror, I'm like, that's not me. Or even during conversations, like I would like to say I'm good at keeping your secrets because I'll probably forget them by the time they told me. Like half this conversation I'll probably forget. It's not that I'm not listening, it's just like I'm trying to, because then you try and hyper focus and try and take the information in, but you're focusing so much on focusing, you're not focusing, and you're like,
yeah. Yeah, I know the one. When on a downward cycle, is there anything we can do to lift you up?
I suppose it's like, the thing is, it's very easy for me to say, oh, just do this, just do that. But I know when you're in those states, it's very hard to reach out to somebody, because when you're in that state, you're not thinking rationally. You are thinking, oh, people don't want to deal with this. People, like, I'll be burdening somebody, or I'll be inconveniencing someone's day, because maybe that's what people have acted like in the past. But sometimes that's where, like, I will just randomly do a TikTok video or vent to Twitter or see if a friend is free, whatever. But, since again, like doing well, it's where I've been relatively okay. And because of the thing I went through a few weeks ago, I feel myself slipping a bit. And somebody commented on like a TikTok live the other day. It was a compliment. There was like, oh, you've changed for the better, blah, blah, which is great. But then I was thinking, I feel myself slipping. People aren't going to like that. So I'm like, I've got to carry on doing these videos. I've got to carry on doing this positive thing. Which isn't what I'm about. I'm about, like being honest with it.
Yep.
But then it's this kind of like pressure. It's like, oh, I need to be the best version of myself for people to like me, which is then the fear of abandonment, like, because then they're going to leave. And so, yeah, it's kind of, I'm a bit like that at the moment with it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think my advice in that situation would be and this sort of came up in your answer is remind me that I'm still loved when I'm down, because my brain's going to do basically my self-esteem when I'm anywhere above here is fine. When I'm anywhere above here is off the charts. When I'm anywhere below here is non-existent. And I actually ever think I'm going to, change the world, or I think that, I'm pointless. And genuinely, that is how I can feel. And I can feel like that within this. I can feel both of those things within the shape of a day. I can think that I'm going to really help the entire world today. I'm going to do all these amazing things, and then 5 minutes later I can think that I'm completely worthless. And so for me to be reminded of two things. One is that this too shall pass, because it always does. There's no depression that's ever, for me at least, that is never not passed. There's no mania that's never ever not passed. But my brain believes that this is going to linger. My brain believes this is going to pass. So being reminded that that's going to pass, but also for me being reminded that I'm still loved even when I'm not kind of churning things out, reminding myself, reminding that people, being reminded that I'm still loved even if I'm having a bad day. It's like, and I suppose a line which has just popped into my head is, your brain might be thinking badly of itself right now, but we don't think badly of you. That'd be something along those lines. Would be quite nice, not to be overly specific. But
here's a list of phrases to say.
Yeah, well, this is the funny thing, is that with mental health, we often tell people what not to say, what not to do. Don't do this, don't say that, don't do this. But no one ever really says what to say. And I think it is because we all want to hear something different, really. And sometimes I might want to hear something completely different than what I've just said. I know that's complicated. I know that might even seem unfair, but unfortunately, that is just kind of the way it is. And yeah, I've started taking little screenshots of when people have said nice things to me now, like recently, and I'll keep them, because I can't expect the universe to suddenly be like out there with like a tuning fork that's tuned into where my mood is, and like on that day, and then they go, Dave seems to be vibrating at a lower frequency right now. I'd best send him a compliment. It's like, so I've got them kind of in my screenshots on my phone, and I did a few last week where I took screenshots of the Twitch chat because they were all being super lovely. I mean, they're always super lovely, but they were being even super lovelier.
I think I find like the mental health community, like they're just it's so validating, not in a bad way, but it's like, especially with the BPD community as well, not a lot of people without BPD get it, or want to get it sometimes. So, you could put a very specific thing out on Twitter, like that's very weird. You're like, does anyone else with BPD experience this very specific thing? And they're like, yes. But okay, I feel less normal, less weird now. But I think, like you said, we always say like what things not to say. When you're anxious, don't just say don't be anxious. Like,
thanks.
Like, or just be positive. It pisses me off. Positive vibes only. Let's not. The thing is, the people that have mental health matters, be kind, and stuff in their bio, they're usually the most like problematic people. That are like, oh well, you're dealing with more than depression, anxiety. No, but be kind, guys. When they're called out for being a twat.
It's a great big mess. And the problem is it's often as well a mess that is the majority of time built on top of the best intentions. But going back to before, what you put out multiplied by how many people see it. Sometimes the people with the worst intentions go the most overlooked. Sorry, the people with the best intentions. Sometimes the people with the best intentions go overlooked.
Yeah.
Sometimes the people with the worst intentions get the most attention.
Do you find that affects your view on something? Because then you're like, oh well, more people agree with that, but I agree with that. So you're like, oh well, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I've got I'm in a good place today, so so my view on this will be slightly different than what it is. On when I'm not in a good place, I think I'm fucked. I've got no chance. There's no chance I'm ever gonna make any impact. I'm against the odds on all of this. Yep. When I'm in a good place, and I'm in a good place today, I turn around and say, right, look, we agree that the current situation with mental health needs work.
Yes.
If the current situation needs work, it might need a different point of view than what's currently being spouted. The point of view that are being spouted right now aren't helping. Therefore, if I have a different point of view, it might not be the right point of view, but it might be the change that's needed. And that's the thing. I come from a musical background, and one of my former clients and friends used to basically always say the music he wanted was never there, so that was why he wrote the music he did. And that was the same for me. It's like, okay, the mental health content I want isn't there, So I write the content that fills that gap. And literally yesterday, because I work I do some pieces in collaboration with the NHS, and yesterday my friend who I work with in the NHS basically phoned me and he said, they've asked us if we're putting anything out for a mental health awareness week. Are we? And I was like, well, I was going to do a video on nature today and he goes, all right, cool. He's like, can you send me that? And instead of me making one, I'll just forward that to the mailing list, which is nice for me because theoretically, if they all opened it, I'd get 26,000 views. But but they don't. But they're all watching this now, and they're all going to complain about me. But I said to him, okay, but I must warn you before you put this, before you act, just go and, because he trusts me. I'm like, I must warn you before you just shove this YouTube link in your mailing list and send it out. I'm going to acknowledge right at the beginning of that video that a lot of people think that the theme of nature this year is flaky and not a fix. It's not really going to change anything. And then I'm going to go into why I think it's important and how we need to look at it. And basically the video is that nature is a component that can help with your mental health, as is conversation, as is therapy, as is exercise, as is nutrition, as is good sleep. All of these things are components. And if we look at it and say, if we say it's not a fix, it's like, that's okay. Last year's one was sleep. That wasn't a fix either. The year before was body image, which wasn't necessarily a fix, but it was to raise more awareness around it. Mm-hmm. And mental health, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. It's not called Mental Health Fix Week. It's we're trying to raise awareness around things. But the problem is, and the thing, like a few weeks back, the fishing suddenly became a new thing that was being prescribed by doctors to help with anxiety. And again, fish. Yeah, well, you know what? I've never done it. My brother-in-law swears by it, right? but I've never done it. But again, the way he described it to me a couple of weeks back was he goes out, he gets out, he has to go first thing in the morning. There's only a season, so there's only certain times in the year he can do it. But he goes out first thing in the morning, and he doesn't take his phone or anything. He just sits there, and he sat there. He's just absorbing like nature, doing the bit of fishing. He wouldn't use the word it was mindful at all, because he's not like that. He's my wife's from Latvia, and her brother is as much of an Eastern European stereotype as you can imagine. But he's just like, yeah, it's like it was kind of his, and it basically was a form of mindfulness for him. But this is the whole thing, is that going back to the whole two fences, mm-hmm. like if this side of the fence tries to say this is the fix, which it's done, exercise is the fix, exercise will fix everything for you. I remember listening to like the Joe Rogan podcast a few weeks. Said literally like, a good hard exercise is good for whatever ails you. It's like, nah, it's not. It's like it's genuinely not. It's like it's if we sell it to people like it's a fix, then they're going to be sorely disappointed when it's not. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if we're over here saying that if we're expecting Mental Health Awareness Week to be more than just a little nudge, more than then that's again on us. I think it's like, it'd be lovely if in Mental Health Awareness Week, if everything came together and mm-hmm. and suddenly like, I don't know, like there were some secrets and answers and all these things that people have kind of been able to share in small groups before, that was suddenly brought to the front and able to help people. It'd be great if, and that's the whole. It'd just be great if it did really change things. And I think it's there to raise awareness. The problem is awareness is there. We all know mental health exists. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, categorically, things like for BPD, there's not enough awareness yet. There's an absolute abundance of awareness around anxiety and around depression, more so around depression and anxiety, because depression seemingly comes in one variety. It doesn't, but anxiety comes in about 50. Well, it comes in 4 major categories. But it's like people didn't realize what health anxiety was so much until last year. People didn't realize what social anxiety was so much until things started opening up again, and they've out of practice with social situations. That's leveled the playing field a little bit with anxiety, because some people have experienced acute anxiety that other people have been experiencing chronically for years, and therefore more empathy, more understanding, more, oh yeah, this is what that is. But it's not, but that situation has not come along and shown anyone what it's like to have BPD or shown anyone what it's like to have bipolar.
I think this is the thing, because like a lot of sorry, it's
your interview. I was just off on a rant.
Like Mental Health Awareness Week and stuff, it's great, but I think it's just a lot of people, they'll raise that awareness for a week and then not bother, or they'll share it on social media, but they don't put it into practice with their friends, with their family, with their partners.
Exactly.
And, you know, there's more things out there about BPD. It was like how to handle your BPD partner, or how to blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, because again, you know, it's very stigmatized. There's not many positive things out there.
Yeah.
Because, again, people are unwilling to really see it from our point of view, I think. I really understand how it does affect us. You know,
yeah. That leads perfectly into a question that's actually in the chat right now that says, how do you handle the person or people who are really negative or backhanded? I have someone in my life that is like that, and I don't want to lose a friendship, but I feel like shit after seeing them.
I mean, luckily for me, like, some people just took themselves out of the equation some way or another. So it's very much, I wouldn't have to deal with them. And I understand, like, it's very hard when you do have that person close, because I think I've realized there's certain people where it's like, okay, especially in terms of like toxic people, it's about like managing expectations with them, keeping the conversation light. You know, there's people like, oh, well, you know, you can talk to me. But then when I try talking to them, they're very invalidating, minimizing things, gaslighting. So now I'm just like, you know what? I'll just talk to them about the weather. I'll talk to them about something I saw on TV, you know, because I understand that it's not easy for everyone to like, okay, I don't need this relationship with this person anymore. Could be a parent, could be a sibling, could be work, you know, and or friends or partners. And, you know, I hate these people say, oh, just leave. If it was that easy, people would. And especially with emotionally abusive people or toxic people, it's such a slow burn. You don't notice it at first. And then that's why you keep making these rationalizations. But so I guess it's kind of really just assessing, really. I know they said that they usually leave feeling not great. And again, that's kind of like what I've been doing, that I've done over the past year. But again, I think it was just easier for me because some people just moved or just weren't around as much. Or I just block them on everything. I don't have to talk to them, which probably isn't healthy. But at the same time, you know, I kind of look at it as like, okay, some of these people I don't have a close relationship. I've never had a close relationship with. They're not entitled to one now. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to that thing, kind of like nobody's entitled to treat you like crap, you know, just because whether it's a family member or friend. And especially with BPD, I find, you know, yes, we've got to work on ourselves. But again, if nobody's willing to see it from our point of view, then for me, it says more about them. Yeah. Because it's like, okay, well, again, you want me to meet your needs, but you're refusing to meet mine. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I like one of the abusive relationships I was in, you know, like he literally said to me, oh, I can tell you how to feel if I think it's fine. Literally gaslighting and invalidating my feelings before even saying it. Like, I hate when people say, oh, don't take this the wrong way, but
I saw you tweet about that this morning.
I'm like, okay. But, you know, and also like whenever I called him out on something, he'd then turn it around on me. Like, I'm very self-conscious about my teeth. They're not great. I'm sorting that out. And, you know, he was picking me up because I was supposed to be meeting his friends. He was like, oh, don't take this the wrong way, but can you brush your teeth? I'm like, I did. Then I said to him, I was really hurt by that. Then he was like, oh, I just don't want my friends to like judge you. I was like, if you knew your friends well enough and they were good people, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't. But okay. And then, you know, again, it's those people where it's like, they want you to meet their needs. Mm-hmm. but you're like, can you do the simple thing for me? Like, oh no, you're crazy. Or like, you're clingy, you're needy. I'm like, no, I'm needy just because you're not meeting my needs. We all have needs, and for people to act like, okay, you're allowed to meet one person's needs, but just because they've got BPD or whatever, you shouldn't be meeting their needs.
Exactly, yeah. It's like we expect to reach.
I don't know if that answers that question.
We expect to meet a normal person's needs. It's like, but your needs are unexpected or whatever it might be.
And it was like you said, like you're saying, like it's, when you're having a good day, you can think like this, and it's like, with BPD, like, and bipolar, whatever, it's about managing the symptoms. The symptoms are never going away completely. You might be able to go like longer periods without showing them, but that was the other thing. Like people be like, oh well, you've been in therapy, you learnt this coping skill on Friday. Why don't you know it by Monday? Or they're like, oh,
you were doing a piano lesson. You learned some Mozart on Friday. Why can't you play it perfectly by Monday?
Like, honestly, and it is really where your mindset is on that day. It's different day to day. It's different hour to hour, Things happen. And so people are, you were doing so well. Like, thanks for making me feel worse.
I think one of the hardest things about that as well is that some of the changes that we need to make them when our symptoms aren't there. Like, as in, like, so we need to, like, especially when it comes to assessing boundaries with somebody else, for me to assess my boundaries when I'm here is I am going to do what the other person would refer to as overreacting. I will not communicate myself in a way that is conducive of a good, productive conversation. And I imagine the same for yourself when you're symptomatic. It's like, okay, that's the moment when when your brain is like, oh my God, these boundaries need to be assessed right now at this very, very second. But the problem is when we're feeling okay, it's like, well, okay, now I have the capacity to address those boundaries, but I'm kind of enjoying the fact that things are kind of comfortable at the minute. So I don't want to rock the apple cart, It's like I don't want to do that, but I have the capacity. So one of the hardest things for me has often been, and we've talked about this a few times in the podcast before, is deliberately creating a controlled conflict. And it's hard, and I don't always do it. But like when when I need to assess boundaries with a friend, there's an expression I use, which is don't let your condition make your decision. Okay. So I try not to react in that situation, which is very, very difficult, takes a lot of energy, but I try not to kind of address that. And I try and like leave a little flag and say, okay, if this is still a problem when I'm feeling okay again, I'm going to do this. But then obviously when I get into that situation, I'm very fearful because it's my brain's going, no, we're comfortable right now. Like, don't do this. But ultimately, more often than not, in fact, I would say every time I've either strengthened a relationship, it's either strengthened or it's ended. Like basically, because when if you approach that in the rational way, at least, because as you said earlier, you'll question what you've said and what you've done when you walk away. People have got that misconception about BPD is that people don't care. You couldn't care if you said those things, you wouldn't. And it's like no, care lots. Beat myself up loads afterwards, but it's either if I know that I've addressed that, approached that situation in a way where I was speaking as rationally as I possibly could, and I was being as reasonable as I possibly could, and the other person didn't see my requests as reasonable. It's like, well, I know in my heart that this is, and this came along with increased self-esteem over the years, but I know in my heart that okay, if this person can't respond to my request on this, then this isn't going to work out. And whereas it's like, whereas if I'd have done that, if I'd have reacted like that when I was symptomatic, then I would have always questioned whether or not the request was valid, but my behavior was the invalid part, or whether the person rejected the request because of the way I'd communicated it versus whether the request on its own merits, basically.
I think like boundaries are so complex, and I saw this really interesting thing. I can't remember what it was called. It was called like something model or something, but basically you could be I think it really depends on the person you're trying to set boundaries with. It could be a really hostile person where if you set a boundary and they get really angry or violent, whereas, you know, you might be better at setting boundaries with a friend because, you know, they are respectful. So like, oh, actually, that's not for me or something. And I think, you know, considering black and white thinking is one of the symptoms of BPD, I see a lot of people do it. They're like, oh, so you're good at that. You're good at it in every aspect of your life. No. Different people means different experiences. You react differently to different people. And, you know, the thing is, though, I'm one of those people who's like, oh, I've set a boundary in my head. That counts. Like, I've done it there.
Oh, if only. That'd be so great.
Or like, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm really sorry. You're like, no. Because I realize there's a thing. So you fight with flight, you've got freeze. But there's also one called fawning. So especially if you're dealing with maybe an abusive person or somebody that had some sort of power over you or whatever, instead of like fight, flight, or freeze, you'll do anything to like please them so they don't get mad at you. So, oh yeah, sure, I'll make you dinner, or yeah, sure, let's hang out, even if you don't want to. And then people are like, oh, you're two-faced. I'm like, no, I'm just literally not wanting the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like with BPD, like with the fear of abandonment and lack of sense of self, they sometimes do a thing we do called like mirroring. So like, I can pick up bits of people's personalities. It's a bit like Kirby when he like opens his mouth. But so then people are like, oh, your personality's fake. I'm like, well, the chance is I probably got the personality from you, so maybe you're the one that's fake. So I don't know what to like there. But
I love that.
But no, it's like, thing is, again, it's one of those, because I remember there's somebody on YouTube called Recovery Mum, and she does a lot of videos about BPD. I remember when I was first diagnosed, I was like watching a lot of her videos, and she'd done this thing with her mouth when she was thinking. She'd be like that, and I picked that up because I was watching a video so many times, and I caught myself doing it once while I was out with a friend, and I was like, I'm literally not being myself. It's like, I hate when people say to me, oh, just be yourself. I'm like, I literally do not know who I am. Or like when people are like, oh, you've got a great personality. I'm like, thanks, it's a disorder and it's probably yours. But thank you.
Oh, amazing. Scrooge says send some massive love to Brian for you, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. It's actually really helped her a lot. But she also asked if you don't mind answering, at what age was it that you first had suicidal thoughts?
God, probably around, like, I started having CAMS counselling when I was like 11. So I think it was around then, which, you know, 11 is quite young. And it's sad, you know, I see multiple news articles now where it's like people even younger, they're like 7, and they've, you know, they've committed suicide, or I hate that term, committing, but
it's actually we're not really supposed to use it anymore, apparently. But the actual alternative to it's worse, because it's supposed to be successful suicide, which. Okay. Just like how, you know, obviously BPD's been we should probably touch on that briefly before we finish as well, actually. But yeah, carry on. Sorry.
I think, you know, to be honest, I think social media has a play in that, because when I was 11 or 12, social media wasn't really a thing, so I'd be bullied and then I'd go home. Whereas, like, it was horrible because, like, when I was first at college, that was the same year my dad died. I was going to therapy, so sometimes I wouldn't be in lessons. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had classmates leave horrible voicemails because, unfortunately, in performing arts, you get those kind of entitled kind of people and they act like they're the teachers. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you have no authority over me. Jackie Weaver, you do not have the authority. No, I think, you know, and then once I was late because I was talking to my math teacher about some work, 2 people were in front of me about talking to performing arts classrooms, like, oh, for God's sake, Brian's not here again. I was like, excuse me, I'm right here. And, you know, I think first time I got a comment on social media to tell me to kill myself, I was 14. And I even had somebody do it, like, about 5-6 years ago. Like, I'd just come out of a relationship where that was quite toxic on both parts, if I'm honest. You know, I wasn't well, but I admit my faults in that. And apparently my ex was talking to this person, and apparently, like, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an abusive person. Like, I literally, you know, sometimes I would drink, but it was like I was not an alcoholic. And then it's like, oh, well, you should go and kill yourself anyway. And people will rationalize why they say that to people. And, you know, it's not nice. And so having those thoughts, especially at a young age, because I don't know whether, plus, you know, BPD, intense emotions, and then like teenage emotions as well.
Where does one end and the other begin?
But I just remember like crying a lot at school. Like, I had like a red card thing to leave lessons, and just this. I know I'm very weird doing this, but like, I loved music from a young age, and I still do it now. But like, I will literally go on a walk and I will literally pretend I'm in a music video. I'll like do lip syncing and everything. Hence, it's probably why I'm good on TikTok, because I've been training all my life for it. You know, it was just made for me. But it's weird that like something that was a coping mechanism from like a young age is still with me today. I think because I still live in this town, there's still a lot of people I used to go to school with, and people don't realize this. You know, there's somebody that I went to school with that maybe I've not spoken to in 10 years. I'll see them, I'll still think they're going to say something horrible to me or whatever, and because it really does stick with you. But because I also watched your video about gaming as well, like, because I love Pokemon, I love Animal Crossing, Kingdom Hearts, but it's also like kind of like you said in the video, like realizing, okay, if I'm angry a lot, I should not be playing, you know, like shooting games. You know, because like, have you played Until Dawn on PlayStation 4?
I have not.
It's such a good game, but I made the mistake of playing it very early on moving into my flat at like midnight. I was like, oh, I've got to go to bed. Oh no. But no, like, it's that escapism. And whether that's, and I think that's why I kind of liked acting as well, because people would be like, oh, but when you're on stage, you not get like nervous. I'm like, no, because I'm not being myself, which is, you know, just my disorder, I suppose. But I remember once at college, we was doing this scene and I had to get like up in someone's face and like shout at them. I actually scared them. I'm very sorry. Because the thing is, I think I like to say I'm a nice person. I hate those people like, oh, I'm a nice guy. But I'm relatively nice and relatively chill. So be able to play those kind of characters, it's kind of fun. Because you kind of like get to be somebody I'm literally not. And then I can shout at people. And it's warranted.
Yeah. See, I remember having to do that once for a sketch in some youth group when I was younger, and one of the there was a topic about misunderstandings, and I was supposed to create a fake misunderstanding whereby by when one of the other people in the group deliberately spoke over the person who was hosting, and I had to kind of like shout at them and tell them that they were trying to take over and all the rest of it. It was all staged, and I knew the person who was leading the group knew, and the person I was going to speak over, the person I was going to shout at knew, but no one else in the room knew. And even literally thinking about that now, I must have been 21 when that happened, which is 18 whole years ago. And yeah, and now I can feel myself. I can feel my cheeks getting a little bit flushed from it, because I still feel, even when I have to fake it like that, I still feel. I think if everybody have known in the room, like if it was you know, proper acting, if it was acting and everyone knew this is all an act, I'd probably be okay. But because the way the explanation was, it was supposed to go into like, see, this is how easy it is to have a misunderstanding, and that was the segue into the rest of the conversation.
Okay.
And I don't know how everyone in that room reacted at that point, because like my head was like just a complete and utter noise and mess by that point, and me thinking that everyone was going to hate me and never want me to come back. It was it was fun. So I don't know if I could even be fake mean, like, unless everyone was in on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, you see those things where like they'll do like skits like in public,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
If I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of that, I'd be like, oh my god. Oh.
No, I definitely couldn't do anything like that. I've got this weird thing, like I do not mind being the center of attention when I'm supposed to be. Like so streaming, fine. I'm supposed to be the center of attention, you know. Like I did my birthday on stream this year, and we had like 6 stand-up comedians, one of my friends, and then another 2 of my friends came into the Zoom call later on, and it worked really well because you had like 7 people on the screen that are all used to A, being the center of attention, but B, they were all comedians, so they're used to fighting for the center of attention. So all of us were fighting for the center of attention, and it was just chaos for like 3 hours, but it was brilliant. And like the next day, my wife was like, "How was it?" And I was like, "It's one of the best birthdays I've ever had." And she's like, "Why?" I said, "Because I was fighting to be the center of attention all night, and I didn't feel like I was out of place at any point for doing it. You know, like if I'm on a night out with friends, it's like, am I kind of being too attentiony? Am I doing this? Am I kind of taking? Because I do. I mean, well, once it's on the way up and I'm feeling good, there's no slowing that down for me. And there has been at times in my life when being up here has caused nearly as many problems as being down there.
Yeah. That's the thing, because I think like sometimes when I've been up, like that's where then I might be bad at like physical boundaries. I'll constantly try hugging people if they don't like hugs. I'm like, no, just hug me, and they're like, no, get off.
Yeah, we need symbols for that. Because I'm a friggin' hugger.
No hugs.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's one of the gyms that I know basically had this what was it? They had a wristband suggestion for when the gyms reopened. I don't know if they ever pulled it off, but they basically had like a red, green, and amber wristband, and an amber was okay. I don't mind being in the gym and chatting and stuff, but like still keep your distance. Whereas the red was like, stay away from me entirely, don't even talk to me. And the green was actually, I want interactions, I want all the high fives, I want the sweaty hugs and all the rest of it. And I thought, you know what, that'd be so nice if we could have like a great big agreed upon thing like that, because there's no one in any of those 3 colours or anything that's in between those 3 colours is right or wrong. Like, you know, the fact that both you and I are huggy people, that's not wrong. The fact that some people don't want to be touched whatsoever, that's not wrong. What the problem is, like, we don't know immediately. There's no, and the thing that was one of the things that up until COVID, it was always accepted, like, you know, that everyone has a handshake or a hug or whatever when they meet. And it was only when COVID happened that I started seeing it pop up on Twitter saying, "Oh, I can't," you know, when all this is over, I hope that handshaking never comes back. And I'm like, "God, I really miss handshaking." Like, if someone was like, "I hope hugs and things like that don't," I'm like, "Oh my God, I really miss hugs." And I was just like, I needed to see that, like, you know, that kind of that side of it as well. But it's like, it's, you know, we unfortunately we need some sort of signal, and then there's like, it turns into a traffic light party.
I thought about that about like hairdressers as well, because I hate making small talk with the hairdressers, and I'm like, or like, especially because like I loved your like really like macho man impression earlier, because sometimes I do that. Like, so the thing is, I sound very camp, and I went out with a friend for food. Like, I think it was like last year somewhere. Obviously, she's used to me. Then a bloke brings the drink over. I go, "Cheers, mate." She goes, "Was that you?" I was like, "Yes, babe." Yes, it was.
Oh, darling. Left 2 points in a packet of crisps.
But literally, like in hairdressers or like tattoo, like where it's like, they're like, "Did you watch football last night?" No. Like people that was doing my carpet, they was like, "I watched football." No. Ended that conversation. Then they was talking about this like really like hot woman. I'm like, right. Then it was like, "You could use this as your little love palace." Like, is that an offer?
It's funny, isn't it? It's like I don't like small talk either, but I like big talk. That's so.
Sorry, I'm listening. It's just like the thing's not plugged in.
It's all right. So yeah, I don't like small talk, but I like having big conversations. So, like, you know, in taxis and stuff, it's like, I'm not going to just jump into. So how's your mental health there, Mr. Cabby? But like in my barbers now, I've been going to the same barbers for like 2 years. Yeah. So we like, and so that's but the weird thing is, like, I get when there's only, at the minute there's only me and him in there usually, but there was another barber and another chair in, and I'd get quite self-conscious about it, which is weird because it's what I talk about online in front of multiple people all the time. But again, it's here I'm expected to. Yes. There I'm just a guy in a chair with an opinion. And I had the same thing when I was getting my most recent tattoo, and but I ended up getting over it because I was in there for like 3 hours or whatever. But because I was getting this one, which is half a heart and a brain made into a semicolon.
Okay.
And I was getting that one done, and obviously that led to conversation around the tattoo studio about what it was about and all the rest of it. And I was like, right, well, I'm into mindset, but I'm also into like coming at it from the heart, and therefore, and obviously I've survived a suicide attempt, so the semicolon's significant of that and all the rest of it. And I don't want the work I do to just be cerebral and answers, and I also don't want the work I do to just be emotional without any of that put in there. So I was explaining all of that. And then that obviously led to like huge amounts of conversation around, like with all the other tattooists and all the other people in the chairs. And eventually I kind of eased into it. But the small talk, it's what I say creates an uncomfortable silence, because there's a comfortable silence when you get in the taxi and there's no conversation. The silence is kind of comfortable at first. But then once the person asks you one thing, it now moves from a comfortable silence to an uncomfortable silence, because in your brain you're like, do I need to carry on this conversation? Does this person think that I'm being rude now because they've spoken to me and I've not spoken back, but they're not asking any other questions? I remember seeing it in a restaurant a few years back, and Americans are great at it. Is that because they just talk to everybody, and there was like our table, and then there was these two tables of Americans, and then basically when one of them picked up on the accent, one looked over and was like, "Well, what is it that you're having?" And they'd been sat there not talking to each other. Me and my wife were there not talking to anybody except for each other, but like they were sat there like not talking to each other. And then one of them looks over and goes, "Oh, that looks really good. What is it?" And it's like, and basically then the person explained what it was, and then a small period went by, and then it's like you could tell that there was an uncomfortable silence between them. And then one of them turned around and talked to the other table, and then again a small period went by, and it was just like, okay. It's like, because the thing is, there was totally and utterly there was no expectations of the conversation between those two tables before that, right. And then that happened. Thank you very much for the massive raid, by the way, that's just come in. Who was it that brought it? Little Meme. Just kind of meh. Welcome on in. Hope you're doing well. And also, now that I'm speaking to the chat very briefly, hello, my son. My youngest son popped in a minute ago, and because I was ignoring the whole chat, I ignored him as well. So hello.
Bad parenting.
But I know it's terrible, isn't it? It's terrible. Is there anything else on like, if I was less briefly before I start? Obviously BPD's been recently reclassified as IU. Is it IU? And
EUPD. The thing is, I don't know whether because I think it's on my diagnosis letter it says EUPD rather than BPD.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly quite sure, because some people are saying it's like a subcategory or something. But emotional unstable sounds way more stigmatizing. Yeah. And like a few people have said that, I think that also gives people more of a weapon to be like, oh, well, you're emotionally unstable. You don't know what you're talking about, or you're not in the right frame of mind, or so in the wrong hands, that can do a lot of damage. So I don't really like it. Yeah, I mean, I can be emotionally unstable sometimes. But thing is, I do joke about it a lot, but it's just my way to deal with it. But yeah, I found, like, obviously when I tweeted that out, a lot of people aren't liking it.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. And this is something that, like, we've discussed a lot recently with person first language, and the academics want person first language to be used. So person with bipolar as opposed to bipolar person with autism, person with disability, and practically every person I know with bipolar, autism, disability, or anything else we're okay with it. I'm bipolar person, autistic person, and it's this, yeah. It's the thing is, it was. I'm sure it was put across. I'm not 100% certain on this, so I won't speak on it too much. But I'm sure it's put across that borderline personality sort of that felt like a very stigmatic thing, and as you say, emotionally unstable personality sort of how's that any better? You know, like even bipolar disorder, when it was presented to me, it was called Manic Depression. I was 14.
Yeah.
It was 1996. The Spice Girls had just come out. It was a good time to be alive. Two Become One had just been released. Apart from all the bullying, but but you know, we'd just been introduced to the phrase a zig a zig are, so we were okay. And it was referred to then as manic depression, which basically suggests you're either manic or you're depressed. And the same with bipolar is it's what it suggests to a lot of people is that you exist at one of those poles 100% of the time. And like our planet is bipolar. It has a North Pole and a South Pole. It also has a bunch of continents in between the two, and that's a better description. You know, okay, it's. But I don't know what a name, what better a name would be for it, really. Like, you know, I suppose I'm also emotionally unstable, so it's just the names around it are kind of messy, I suppose. But
I think it's like very hard to come up with something perfect to call it. I think. Plus, as well, like the emotionally unstable thing, like that's also just focusing on one symptom, rather than BPD as a whole. Even because like some people are saying, oh, maybe emotion dysregulation disorder, but again, it's like that's just one aspect of it. And you know, like bipolar, you know, like I've got a friend who's bipolar, and you know, it's like you do have those manic and those depressive episodes, but sometimes you're just there, or it's kind of fluctuating, and then people will then be like, oh, well, maybe you don't have it then because you're relatively fine.
Oh yeah, I've had that one.
Sometimes, like, even with BPD, I'm like, do I have it? I'm fine. Then I'll be on the floor. Like, literally, it happened like the other week. I was dancing around the living room to like cheesy music. Then literally an hour later, I was on the floor crying. Then I was fine another hour later because I was eating a cheese sandwich. Like, it just kind of happens.
So cheesy music and cheesy sandwiches, that's the...
Apparently,
you said you were bad at, you know, you weren't very good at advice. There's great advice. Cheesy music and cheesy sandwiches, I think that's...
There we go.
That should be the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week 2022.
You can't listen to Steps and not be happy. So.
It's true. It is true. And funnily enough, like when you mentioned, obviously, that the practice for TikTok, I used to call it my guilty pleasure. And then I'm just like, why the hell am I guilty about it? Actually, TikTok by Kesha, like I used to when I did my previous job, I was always off on a Friday, so I'd always clean the house when the house was empty on a Friday, and I'd have like Kesha on, and I'd be singing it at the top of my voice, and it makes cleaning so much easier. And it's just like, and then it's like, okay, you know, no, don't want people to know those parts, and then you know, 4 years later, it's like I ended up singing TikTok at someone's wedding, so it was it all came full circle in the end. But I liked what you said before about, you know, I've been practicing for that all my life. It's like TikTok, I'm ready for you.
My time has arrived.
Is there anything else on BPD or just your overall experience with mental health that you want to add that the questions haven't led you in the direction of?
I think, again, just that kind of being supportive and validating of it. I think with my experiences of dating, like, then the thing is, I'm usually chill. Like, I'm usually like, yeah, all right. And then I'll like them or they like me. I'm like, I've got to do everything to make them like me even more. And then I'll be like, oh, they put 2 kisses instead of 3. They absolutely hate me. Then I start, it's hard, you know, I went on a date like a few weeks ago. He was like, I really like you. Like, I like you a lot. Then he was like, oh, I want to take things slow. I was like, I assume that's what he was doing anyway. Then he was like, oh, I want to be friends. I'm like, okay. Because he was like, he's just not ready. Thing is, he'd done it by text. I was like, okay, well, can we have a conversation tomorrow properly so I could say my side of things? He's like, yeah, sure. Then he just kept putting it off that day. So I just sent a message. I was just like, look, I don't know if you're saying you want to be friends, just be polite. That's not going to happen if you're not going to have the decency to talk to me. And, you know, I was like, I felt a bit led on. Just stating the facts, really. But because of people BPD being like called toxic. I was like, am I being toxic for saying that? And then plus people were like, oh, it was just one day. I'm like, but you should still respect somebody. And especially where he was saying, yeah, we will talk. Like, even if it was like, actually, I'm not ready to talk right now.
Yeah.
That would have been fine. And I think, that was clearly going to be a pattern. And, he was like, oh, I'm not ready. And then he's still back on dating sites. So, and again, like I went through this whole thing, like, again, it's hard because then people do think I'm then crazy. So I was literally having like a proper crying fit over it. So I was like trying to rack my brain thinking like, was it something I did? Because we had a good date. And plus, he was like, oh yeah, I'll cook for you. We can go like traveling and stuff. So I was kind of like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And because of that fear of abandonment thing and lack of sense of self, then you're kind of like, okay, what do I need to do to make people stay? Because clearly me being me isn't right. And it's hard because, again, I've been more positive recently. But so I think it's going to take the right person for me. I think somebody that is going to be supportive, somebody that wants to understand, somebody that isn't going to make me feel crazy for wanting my needs to be met, and also making sure it's reciprocal. Because, I'd often put up with the bare minimum of them, like hardly texting, or it was always me making the plans or making effort, because those rationalizations, or again, I'll try asking them about it and then they'll just shoot me down. So I think, words versus actions is very important, I believe, because people can say they like you, but it's like getting blood from a stone to have a conversation with them or see them. And people get busy. That's cool. But it's kind of like, if that's not lining up, something's not right. So I think kind of in terms of relationships, I think regardless of what relationship it is, whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, family, work even, I think really take that time to really understand what our triggers are, or, kind of, again, meeting halfway with those needs. Just because I am somebody that I'm one of those people I will need, especially there's days where I'll need like reassurance like 100 times a day. Like they could be like, oh, I love you. And then they go to the bathroom like, oh, do you still love me? I was like, you put that bowl down very loudly. You hate me.
There's far too many overlaps between BPD and bipolar. I'm just like, stop it. I feel too seen. Maybe my diagnosis was wrong. Don't diagnose yourself, kids. It's like, that's the thing. Actually, is there is within the reason our community on Twitch is called Diversity is it's short for neurodiversity, and there is. We've got people with ADHD, we've got people with autism, we've got people with bipolar, we've got people with IED, BPD, DID, and there are so many overlaps in a lot of these conditions that it does make your brain go, maybe I have this too. Because I remember the first time I read the bit about BPD that said you fear being rejected, but sometimes that actually pushes you to push people away. Like even almost as a kind of like either to avoid being, so you're the one doing the rejecting to avoid yourself being rejected, or to kind of test whether or not that person actually really wants to be around. And I'm like, holy crap, I've done both. And it's like, and I know I've done both. But again, like, what we said before, like where does the BPD or the bipolar end, and where does the trauma kind of begin? Like my dad treating me as invisible and then leaving when I was 6, like, the abandonment issues, are my abandonment issues to do with that, or are they to do with bipolar disorder? And it's I think the only way to really say it all is that all of the above, probably. There's, again, like we've both said today, neither one of us is the poster child for BPD or bipolar. It's like we are a representation of it. We are the poster child for our lives with those conditions. And there are, hundreds of thousands of other people out there with these conditions that have a different interpretation, a different representation of that. And I think the phrase "meet you in the middle," I think that's the most important phrase that we've said a bunch of times today, because you're not asking everybody to be 100% considerate of your condition and your emotions all the time. You're asking for them to, okay, I need to be treated a little bit differently than what you might be used to with your standard neurotypical person. And it's going back to that overreaction, underreaction, reasonable. Is that a reasonable request? And I think that is a perfectly reasonable request, And I think it's great that, I actually wrote the words "meet me in the middle" about 20 minutes into this conversation, and it's come back up time and time again as we've spoken. I think that, knowing that as well and putting that message out there, I think that's really important to actually break down the stigma as well, because again, going back to those two fences, the fence of we want the world to change for us, the fence of the world wants us to change for ourselves. It's like, let's meet somewhere in that field that's in between those two fences.
Maybe that could be your next tattoo.
A fence. Just have them here. I've got nothing on the chest, you see. So I'll have a fence with like a gate round both my nipples or something.
What, it's like the doorknob? No, it's not. Is it like a fence, not a door? Never mind.
Okay, and there can be a gate on a fence with a doorknob. It's fine, or it can be a door knocker.
Are they pierced? Because then they could be.
They're not. No. This is an amazing way to end the podcast. So I don't edit, by the way, as well. So
God.
A, because I'm lazy. And B,
because people are like, oh, can you edit your video in this way? I'm like, I literally do not have the capacity for that.
I edit. I don't edit the podcasts because I like everything to be perfectly in context. And I also I don't like anyone to be like, I don't even like editing trailers. And if we look at the trailers, which I'm only doing them now for TikTok's sake, really, is I'm doing a 1 minute of like the snippet. And generally the only thing I'll edit out of those sometimes is pauses. Because obviously you've got to get it into a minute. And sometimes, in fact, one of my mods, Lydia, messaged me yesterday saying, "Can you stop your golden nuggets of wisdom," as she calls them? Not me, by the way. If anyone looks at my page, that title was given by Lydia, not me. I am not that full of myself yet. But she went to me yesterday, "Can you make sure your golden nuggets of wisdom are a bit shorter, please? You've got so many good ones in there that are like 2 minutes." She's like, "I'm trying to get you small clips that you can use for your TikTok here, and you're not making it easy for me." And it's like, I'm sorry. But like I'll edit out, like if someone says something and then pauses for a little bit, I'll edit the pause down shorter or whatever, which just because to try and get it into that minute. But I hate things being taken out of context.
I think especially with talking about mental health, mental illness, and showing what it's like, I think like if you're heavily editing down, you're not seeing them like struggling to think of something or, going back over something or whatever. So that's things like people are like, oh, it's not very pretty. I'm like, because mental illness isn't pretty. Here it is.
Yeah. Let's represent it in this neat little box to help. Yeah. Where's the best place for people to find you if they want to kind of follow your work and the rest of the things that you do?
Probably Twitter and TikTok. So interact on there. Like it's bad because like I do have Instagram, I do chuck stuff on there, but that tends to be like a thing that I'll check occasionally. So it's definitely TikTok and Twitter. Yeah. Which is both BPD Bryan. So
awesome. If any of my mods are around, can you pop those links up in chat? If not, I'll pop them up in chat myself in a minute. It's been absolutely awesome chatting to you. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been so fun.
Yeah, I love it when hour-long conversations go for an hour and 50. And that's the thing I've now started saying to people in emails. It's like, look, how much time do you actually have? Because if it's going well, it'll go. Although the worst thing is, and now that people know that, look, I'll get one interview that goes for 20 minutes now, and someone will go, "What? Why was that only 20 minutes?" But as you said, you do get people that you ask them a question, it's like getting blood out of a stone. What's the
longest you've done?
The longest I've done, 4.5 hours with a guy called Beat Cleaver.
Wow.
We didn't use it for the podcast because it's chaos. It's like this is Beat Cleaver. He's an alien. He's an alien beatboxer. He's not. He looks actually kind of like that, only slightly less green, depending on what filter he's got on his camera. But he's an absolutely. I'm wondering actually because up for the challenge has just come into chat now. Ours was about 4.5 hours as well, but we did an hour and a bit of an interview, and then we just went off on tangents. So we got to use that interview. Whereas with Beat Cleaver, I really need to do. I want to interview him again, and I'm doing the same with one of my mods, Cass. I'm interviewing them on Friday morning, and last time basically we did it. It just went in like. This happens when you've got neurodivergent people and a neurodivergent host. We go off in many, many different directions. They're usually the most fun conversations, but then it's like, okay, we do need to sort of maybe do a little bit of the work to make this listenable to by someone who's squirrel, who's a little bit more neurotypical. But
an hour later, you're like, what were we talking about? What was the point of this conversation?
Quite often. Yeah. But the thing is, like, I found with Beat Cleavers, I'd never met someone whose brain works almost exactly the same way as mine as much, and it was a very wonderful experience. But I feel bad that we never managed to get it to the podcast because it was good. But and also there's other little weird things, like the visuals are always improving, and I've got better visuals for the podcasts and stuff now. And it's like now I look at a podcast from like anytime before last December, they're terrible. But even 3 weeks ago, I changed the background, and I'm like, I hate the old background now. It's like needs to be up to date, but yeah, it's fun. But yeah, it's been absolutely amazing chatting to you. Everybody, can we have some exclamation mark love, exclamation mark hype, or even exclamation mark thirsty if you want some thirsty, but wherever